Hello, bonjour. Welcome to the Union Safety Net, le filet de sécurité syndicale, a union podcast for working people. I'm your host, Sébastien Bezeau, et oui, parfois en français aussi. This podcast is hosted by the Union of Safety and Justice Employees, le syndicat des employés de la sécurité et de la justice. Join us for an informative discussion every month about issues currently affecting working people. On today's episode, we're talking to USJE National President David Neufeld and RVP Valda Behrens about the Rcmp. We'll be chatting about USJE members working behind the scenes, as well as campaigns to keep the Rcmp in communities across Canada. David Neufeld, welcome to the Union Safety Net.
I'm super excited to be here today.
So, David, you have served as the National President of USJE since 2021, and you're now in your second term. During the last 3 years, USJE has spearheaded a number of ambitious campaigns to advocate for its members from coast to coast to coast. So as National President, you also committed to meeting as many of USJE's members as possible at their work sites subsequent to your election. So tell me, David, you've clearly traveled the country many times and been to so many work sites. What are you hearing from our members?
Well, the incredible part of my job as National President of USJE is the fact that we have members, almost 19,000 of them now, across the country from coast to coast to coast. And one of the things that I knew when I came into this position is I knew that I had a lot to learn about the members outside of the Correctional Service of Canada and the Pro Board of Canada in particular, because as my experience as a regional vice president for about 14 years, that's where a lot of my focus has been. And even as the national vice president, I had some experience getting to meet members of the Rcmp and some experience with justice and public prosecutions. Those are some of the smaller departments we represent. But I just didn't have much experience with them. And so knowing that we have all these members across the country doing so much fantastic work on behalf of Canadians, I wanted to also learn more about their work firsthand and to see them across the country. So one of the things that I have done over the last number of years since becoming national president is ensuring that I'm taking approximately 1 week a month to go see members across the country. And that really gives me the opportunity to see people in their actual workplace and understanding some of the things that are told to us, which is cerebrally may make sense. But when you actually go and see the work that the members do, it makes a real difference in terms of how you can present the issues. And so, yes, I've had the opportunity to go as far west as Vancouver, British Columbia so far east as St. John's, Newfoundland. I will say, I think, if I can read the map right, as far south about as Hamilton and about as far north as Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories. So, the thing that I always take from these visits is the welcoming nature of our members. They're so happy to see myself. I do these visits with the regional vice president of the area, and we really try to dig in when we go to see those visits to talk to the members, to find some time to chat with them individually or in a group to really understand what's going on in their workplace. And that is really the value of going to see those members. And I can still remember, even recently, I was thinking about my trip up north and how significant that has been in my career to see workplaces that I had heard about but would never have seen before. And I remember flying into the small location of Fort Good Hope in the Northwest Territories. And I went there with another local president, and we went in there, and the detachment service assistant said to me, "You came all this way to see me?" And I said, "Absolutely. We came this far to come and see you." And just to listen to hear her story, or in Iqaluit, I was there last May and talking to a transcriber who works in an office by herself, going through all the material that she has to go through and to transcribe into English or into an Inuit language. And those are things that, you might be able to, in your head, think about and try to place in your memory. But when you go and see them and you see the environments in which they live, and that's right across the country, even the people at Firearms in Miramichi. I went there a period during COVID where things were still not the way they are now. and a lot of people were not in the workplace, but you could see how the work could still be done. And again, even when you think about the pandemic, you think about all we've been through and how we pulled through, as far as we have thus far, you can really see how the members want to engage. They want to hear from their leadership, and they want to be able to express to us directly on what they see in their workplace. So for me, honestly, that's the best part of my job. I sit across from management every single day, whether it's virtually or face-to-face. The best part of my job is to see the members.
Finally, David, we need to talk about one of Canada's signature policing agencies, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. In the fall of 2022, USJE actively campaigned to keep the RCMP in Alberta. How did that go?
Well, if you want to fast forward to the fall of 2022, it was quite an exciting time for us as a union, because throughout the whole year of 2022, we started building websites, meeting with our members. We had a virtual town hall with our RCMP members in Alberta to better understand what was going on in their province. Jason Kenney started this conversation even before I became national president and was discussing on moving towards a provincial police force. And it seemed to be building some momentum, particularly at the beginning of 2022. So we decided to quickly put together a campaign. It was one of the first campaigns when I became national president, and it was to really focus on how are we going to change the narrative in Alberta, where very clearly there's a government in place that's saying we need to separate. Even with the RCMP, we can do our own police force. And I think that even within the province of Alberta, when you talk to Albertans, they understood what the narrative was, but they also wanted to know more about the RCMP and how they serve them. And so what we did is we built a campaign. The National Police Federation also had a campaign. We tried to collaborate with them as well. The one thing that really stands out for me is the leadership that Valda Behrens, the RVP for RCMP Justice PPSC Alberta, did. We were having op-eds that were being developed. We had radio interviews. We had newsprint articles. We were sending stuff out to our membership. And when we did that rally in front of K-Division in November of 2022, that was a really pivotal moment, I believe, in our campaign. It was really cold. I don't know if you remember that. I had probably like 3 pairs of gloves on. We had members of parliament, MLAs that were there showing support. We had some RCMP officers watching us from a distance. We had our space. But you know what? We were so proud to stand there in front of the media and talk about the work that all of our members do. And when you talk to them about it, I think people get it. Like the RCMP are one of these things that are so crucial to rural policing in particular, and the networks that they have and the support services that they have. It's just amazing. So that particular rally was a turning point, I believe. And it was in 2023 when Danielle Smith was still talking about it. We continued to put pressure. And I think it was just before the election in May of 2023, Danielle Smith came out and said, you know what, we're going to put the brakes on this for now. But we can never forget what we've learned through that Alberta experience, that they could have gone down the road. They did their own research. Their data was their data, but we also put forward data, and our other stakeholders put forward data. So I think that through that experience, we've recognized we need to be prepared between now and 2032 for any other possibilities where the RCMP may be questioned and whether they are the police service of choice.
And we say 2032, what's going to happen in 2032? What are you referencing to?
So the policing contracts across this country will expire by 2032. The Department of Public Safety Canada is going across the country between now and then to go over what are the needs of the communities across the country and to renegotiate those contracts, because the RCMP is actually funded in part by the federal government and the municipality covers their portion. So there's a real strong positive effect by having the RCMP right across the country. We know the cost of policing has gone up. We also have seen how important policing resources are to keeping our communities safe. And, our members in particular, they are the operational backbone of the RCMP. And again, a lot of them are not well understood. You wouldn't even know what people are necessarily doing unless we tell you. And that's why moving forward as we continue to move towards 2032, we want to be in a better position when those Albertas come up. I'll use the example of Surrey, BC, or North Cumberland, Nova Scotia. Whoever is taking a look at whether the RCMP is the policing choice for them, we want them to understand this is how important these people are to your community.
So I understand USJE, to that effect, is building a national campaign that will aim to promote the work of the people who work at the RCMP, but are not actual police officers. So who are we talking about, and what's the goal here about this campaign in general?
Well, this campaign is probably the biggest campaign I can think of where it focuses on a singular department. It really is being generated by the fact that these policing contracts are coming up by 2032. And that Alberta experience has really taught myself, and I think our organization, the importance of protecting our members' work and also the work within their communities. You know, that particular campaign in Alberta, we have 700 members in Alberta. Some people might argue, well, they can go work for a local police service or whatever. But I will say our union firmly believes in the services that the RCMP deliver. And I think that who better could speak about their members' work than our union. And so this particular campaign is not only to be able to respond to potential negotiations down the road where people are questioning the value of the RCMP. I want them to hear straight up from our members. I want them to hear from them what they do. So what this campaign will do is involve a collaboration effort with our RVPs across the country, with our locals, to find our members who are willing to talk about their work. Again, I describe them as the operational backbone, the ones that people don't even know that exist. I want us to have interviews with them and to show them publicly so that when people are asking questions, well, what do those members do or what do they do in our community? It's very visible and they can be seen. And I think our members should be so proud of their work. The other thing that really sticks out to me about this campaign is that within the RCMP itself, the issue of culture is always raised. It's a paramilitary culture that has been there for over 150 years. You know, we talk about the one RCMP, the Vision 150. I've been hearing this for many years in my union career. And I believe by building this campaign and really showing even other people within the RCMP what our members do, I think there's a new definition of the value our members perform. You know, when I go do my site visits and I talk to regular members and I talk about the detachment service assistants and the work our members do, you know, they're always saying, oh, they do such a great job. And I believe that they're totally sincere. But I think sometimes within the structures of the RCMP, it doesn't feel all that valuable. Doesn't feel like everyone has the same understanding. People will say it, but actions are more clearer than words. And that's why things like the Detachment Service Assistant Report remain so important. And until those 12 recommendations are addressed, our members will still question, are we really valuable? And so the message I'm sending to our members is you are valuable. We know what you are doing for Canadians. And we want to really, I don't want to say show off, but we want to really show them what they do.
Perfect. Great. Well, David Neufeld, National President of the Union of Safety and Justice Employee, thank you for coming on the Union Safety Net. Merci beaucoup et passez une bonne journée.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Valda Behrens, thank you for joining me here at the Union Safety Net.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Valda, you're a regional vice president at the Union of Safety and Justice Employees. You've worked at the RCMP in Alberta for over a decade. Would you care to tell us more about your career in the RCMP and how you came to USJE?
So I initially started with the federal government with Canada Revenue Agency, and a couple years later ended up taking a position at the High River Detachment as a detachment services assistant. In 2005, there was a job reclassification project that went on, and my position was upgraded to detachment services supervisor. And I remained in that position until 2017. And when I was at the RCMP, I was also the local president for the Calgary and Southern Alberta area. So when the RVP at the time in 2017 decided to retire she approached me about taking on the position of RVP. And in 2017 convention, I was elected into that position.
So, Valda, you mentioned you were a detachment service assistant and then detachment service assistant supervisor. So for Canadians who don't know what a DSA is and what it does on a day-to-day basis, can you tell us what a workday would look like for you then?
Well, that's the interesting part about being a DSA is there is a job description associated to it, but it's basically I will do everything and anything anybody asks me to do. So we look after the front counter. We take on as much of the file as we can so that the members are out in the community. They have boots on the ground. We look after collisions, traffic collisions. We look after criminal record checks. We look after ensuring that the information on the files is accurate and correct. So there's a lot of double checking that information, inputting that into the database because, of course, garbage in is garbage out, and we want our members to be safe. So we need to make sure that the information is correct. We deal a lot at the front counter with front counter complaints, people coming in looking for assistance, and that's usually when it's one of their worst days, right? So we're dealing with difficult situations. We see a lot with the members' files that when you're hired, I mean, there's an inherent risk to working in a police environment, right? And you expect that. But my shock came at the level of what we saw and what we dealt with. The transcriptions were very difficult because the members may be on scene and they can actually see what's happened. We created the picture in our head based on what the people were saying. We also dealt with collisions where people had family members that were killed in that collision. And we were assisting the people at the front counter when they came in to get belongings, when they come in to get details about the file. And a lot of our detachments members aren't on site all the time. So we are the first point of contact and getting that information.
Wow, it's quite the task. And like you say, it's a bit of everything, right? You don't know what to expect when you show up at work, basically. And last month, we had Dr. Richard Deli come on the podcast, and she discussed, the various reports she's done for USJE. And I was surprised that one of her recommendations for the RCMP DSA report was to install bulletproof windows in the detachment. So I don't know, as a regular Canadian, I assume our RCMP office would be one of the safest workplaces, right? But I guess that's not common in some of the DSAs that there's no bulletproof glass.
No, and some of the buildings are RCMP owned, some are municipality owned. They do have a code book that they have to follow in building these buildings. But they want the DSAs to have a sight line from their desk to the front door, through the front door, so we can see who's coming in. Most detachments have no cameras at the front doors. That is something that's being considered. And we only have a protection type product at the front counter for the visual glass. So it's not bulletproof. And we've had incidences, particularly one recently in the last couple of years in BC, where someone fired from the street and it came directly through the detachment front door, the glass at the front counter, and hit the desk of the PSE, who thankfully was not at the desk at the time. It's something we're really pushing for under the OH&S aspect as well. But it's been difficult. It's been a very difficult process to get them to agree to that.
And it's just good for Canadians to know that this is just the reality of what your members are facing on a day-to-day basis. So Alberta has been the focus of one of USJE's major campaigns since 2022. After the Alberta government, under former Premier Jason Kenney, began promoting the idea of the establishment of the creation of a provincial police force, USJE campaigned to keep the RCMP in Alberta. Can you tell us why USJE thought this was the right choice?
Doing this campaign was absolutely the right choice to keeping the RCMP in Alberta. What the provincial government was doing was advertising and promoting a provincial police force to start from scratch. There was a lot of missing information, a lot of lack of information, and it really didn't highlight what we were looking for, which we thought it would affect public safety. There was no cost effectiveness and the community needs. I live in rural Alberta and I work in rural Alberta, and I see what it is that policing here does or can't do based on the resources that they have. And without that clarity, it just wasn't a good plan. The RCMP has a really highly skilled and rich history of policing. And we have over 104 detachments in Alberta alone. The government gave no plan on how that would look. And in all honesty, I believe they were looking at supercenters. So maybe taking the 140 detachments and merging some of them together. So how does that improve public safety?
Right. Well, as we know, the RCMP is, of course, it's more than just a police force. It's a whole array of people doing all kinds of jobs, all kinds of tasks, like you've listed, and all of whom contribute to public safety. USJE, I understand, is in the process of mounting a national campaign, which was presented to us by your president, David Neufeld, to highlight the crucial roles undertaken by many USJE members. How does a better understanding of those jobs help the future of the RCMP?
The public service employees are really the backbone. Like I said, we do so much to make sure those members can keep their boots on the ground, that they have the ability to investigate a file to the fullest, right? Remember, when we don't have the resources, we don't have the equipment, then information doesn't always get gathered to the best of their ability. And then we look at the prosecution aspect of it is we're on a catch and release system, not so much just for Alberta, but across the country, because we don't have the resources to keep those criminals and those offenders under the protective services of Canada. So it's important that we keep the skill, we keep the knowledge, we keep the members that live and work in the communities that are familiar, because members move around so much. That is how we positively impact being in the RCMP in Alberta.
And not just in Alberta, but it's also important for the members of the Canadian public to understand that even some of the members that you represent, they're the ones that train some of the RCMP officers on how to jump a fence, the easiest way. It's just all the things that normal Canadians don't think about. There's so much work done in the background, and I guess that's what you're trying to highlight with this campaign. Now, we recognize that...
Sorry, can I give you a quick example?
Please do.
So we were trailing a stolen vehicle out in rural High River area, and he was making some pretty decent headway in getting away from the members, because our members are from all over the country. They're not necessarily from High River. And we living here knew the roads he was on, where OCC, the telecommunications center, was working off a map, and they were going, go range road, blah, blah, blah. Well, we didn't have range roads listed at that time. And our members going, I don't know what to do. And we got on the phone and we were actually able to go, no, if you take that road, you're going to hit a dead end. Take a quick left there where you are, because we knew the area.
Right.
Right. So
the knowledge and the expertise that the local people, DSAs, can give to those members in uniform is really priceless. And it helps them in achieving what they're supposed to do in order to keep Canadians safe. We recognize that the jobs many of these people do come with, it comes with a lot of risk. From your perspective, how safe are the people who keep Canadians safe, especially the members that you represent, the non-uniformed members?
OH&S is a huge issue for our members. I don't feel the employer or the government takes it as seriously about the vicarious trauma, the possibility of the injuries, what we can be subjected to. And we can go for years good. And then all of a sudden there'll be an incident, there'll be a file that takes us over the edge. And the problem also is we have no one really checking on us. We don't get any yearly assessment or evaluation like the members do and some of the people in the more specialized units. We are left to our own devices to find help. And the other problem with that is it's not like we can come home and talk to our families. We can't come home and talk to friends about files. We are under a security issue. So a lot of it we have to deal with by ourselves. We're out in rural at one-person detachments. So who are we going to go to? And the RCMP does not take that into consideration when they're hiring people to have those conversations with them. They don't take it into consideration when they design safety plans or mental health plans for those that work in the RCMP.
So like you mentioned earlier, Valda, like an officer can arrive on a crime scene, regardless how horrific it can be. Your members, the detachment service assistants or other members are not there on scene, but then they have to deal with the file and kind of revisit that scene with what's written on paper, and then their imagination kicks in. So it's a different form of trauma, but regardless, it's a form of trauma. Now, those RCMP officers where they go on site and they deal with that, do they receive some sort of mental health support? And is that same equal mental health support offered to your members?
No, it is not. And they do receive mental health support. They have dedicated psychologists and psychiatrists for RCMP members.
But not for your members.
But not for our members. So if there's a critical incident, we can't call up someone who has the training in how to deal with trauma. We have to go figure it out in the general public area.
Wow. Okay. So that's a big problem there for your members. So let's try to look at the future, Valda, and try to see some positive in the light at the end of the tunnel. In your world, what would you like to see change in the future for the improvements of work conditions for USJE members in the RCMP?
I would love to see an official training program set up rather than on-site training by someone who, either a member, a uniform member that's there, or hands-on training by someone that works in the detachment. I think that's a high priority to get that training in there. And the discussion when you're hired about what it's like to work in the RCMP, in a police environment, so that, I mean, my first week at RCMP, you're waiting for all your security access to programs and stuff. So they gave me insurance letters. They said, go pull the file, photocopy everything. I pulled the file and out falls all these pictures of a fatal collision with children. And it shocked me. I was like, oh my God, now I have to photocopy these and send them to an insurance company and treat it like it's just a paper file. And people need to know that going into the job, that this is what you're dealing with. We have ICE, which is the Integrated Child Exploitation. We have special operations and all of that. And you're alone. You're alone. And we really need to push that. I also want to see the government recognize us as federal employees and not provincial type employees, because when something happens and you need WCB, which is what we call it in Alberta, workers' compensation, we follow the provincial rules where someone in Ottawa, someone in the Northwest Territories, in Nunavut, they have a whole different set of processes for WCB or whatever they call it. And it's very difficult when we work under the same employer as a federal agency, but we're treated based on what's happening in the province.
Well, thank you for summing up what it is to work for the RCMP in Alberta and your over a decade of service. And thank you for your service in keeping Canadians safe in Alberta and for advocating on behalf of your members and just sharing the light on what year the RCMP campaign was in Alberta. So again, Valda Behrens, thank you for being here on the Union Safety Net.
Awesome. Thanks, Seb. Have a good day.
Merci. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Union Safety Net, Le Filet de Sécurité Syndicale, a union podcast created by USJE for working people. If you have any feedback on today's episode or would like to suggest a topic you want us to cover, please reach out on social media platforms. We love to hear from our listeners. I'm your host, Sébastien Bezeau, and I hope you'll join us next month for another episode of the Union Safety Net, le filet de sécurité syndicale.